News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hey, welcome along. GB News live on your telly and on your wireless and on your teas made, but you need the premium promo code for that one. On tonight's edition of the Mark Steyn Show, a leaked US Supreme Court decision upends the politics of abortion in America. And Naomi Wolf and Ann McElhinney are here with their thoughts. Jasmine Birtles will talk cost of living, and Gordon Chang on what's going on in Shanghai. And is it headed here? Plus, the one thing we can never get enough of, your questions and comments. Send them along to gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet me at GBNews. We love to hear what you think on these things. All that coming up after Polly Middlehurst with the latest news.
Mark, thank you. The top stories on GB News. The Prime Minister has told Ukrainian MPs that their country must and will win the war. Boris Johnson is the first world leader to address their parliament since the invasion began, and he announced a £300 million military aid package for the country. President Zelensky said Ukraine and the UK are now brothers and sisters. And the Prime Minister said it was Ukraine's finest hour, and they've broken what he calls the irresistible force of Putin's war machine.
Your children and your grandchildren will say that Ukrainians taught the world that the brute force of an aggressor counts for nothing against the moral force of a people determined to be free. They will say that Ukrainians proved by their tenacity and sacrifice that guns and tanks cannot suppress a nation fighting for its independence. And that is why I believe, and I know, that Ukraine will win.
Well, more than 100 people who were trapped for weeks in the Ukrainian steel plant in Mariupol have finally reached safety. The evacuees had been living alongside Ukrainian fighters in underground bunkers in Mariupol for about 2 months. The city's mayor says more than 200 civilians are still stuck in the plant and 100,000 more remain in the city, which is controlled by Russian forces. Here, energy firms have been given a deadline to explain why they're increasing customer direct debit payments amid accusations it's beyond what is necessary. The Business Secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng, confirmed the energy regulator Ofgem has issued compliance reviews. Suppliers have 3 weeks to respond. He He warned firms that if set payments aren't fair and reasonable, action will be swift, including substantial fines. As you've been hearing, the US Supreme Court says it's launched an investigation after confirming the authenticity of a leaked draft seeking to overturn abortion law in America. Chief Justice John Roberts said he's ordered court martials to investigate the leak, adding the draft wasn't in its final draft. The document suggests the Supreme Court will vote to overturn the Roe v. Wade decision that legalised abortion nationwide in America. The President, Joe Biden, says his office will be ready to protect abortion rights if a ruling is issued. Here, a Tory police and crime commissioner has been caught speeding 5 times within 12 weeks. Caroline Henry, who pledged to crack down on speeding for Nottinghamshire police, was found breaking the 30-mile-an-hour limit. She committed 2 of the offences 2 days in a row. She's appeared at Nottingham Magistrates Court today after admitting the offences at a previous hearing in February. And the World Health Organization warns obesity has now reached epidemic proportions in Europe, causing around 1.2 million deaths every year. The new report finds nearly 60% of adults and 8% of children under 5 years old are all overweight, citing the COVID pandemic as making things worse, with a drop in exercise and people eating more fat, salt and sugar. On TV, online and on radio via DAB+, you're with GB News. And now it's time for Mark Steyn.
Ladies and gentlemen, the purported leader of the free world.
Comprehensive package of that will enhance our underlying effort to accommodate the Russian oligarchs and make sure we take their ill-begotten gains. We're going to accommodate them. We're going to seize their yachts, their luxury homes, and other ill-begotten gains of Putin's kleptocracy. Kleptocracy and the guys who are the kleptocracies.
Well, if it's any consolation to Joe Biden fans, nothing else works in Washington. Nothing. He is merely emblematic of American decrepitude, not a freak exception in an otherwise crackerjack capital. As you just heard from Polly, yesterday we had another example. What would be a staggering breach of operational norms in a functional polity, but not apparently in the District of Columbia. The US Supreme Court is currently considering an abortion case and would, in the normal course of events, announce its decision at the end of term in a couple of months' time. Instead, someone leaked the court's ruling, leaked the court's decision. It was leaked because that guy we just saw, that Joe Biden guy there, has sinking approval numbers deep into Jimmy Carter territory. Everything he touches turns to, well, you know what. But between inflation and open borders, Omicron and Afghanistan, actual enthusiasm for Joe Biden is all but statistically undetectable, and the Republicans seem pretty confident they're set for a landslide in the November midterms. How do you prevent that? Well, get the Democrat base all ginned up about something. That's hard to do when they're running everything into the ground. But the landmark Roe versus Wade abortion decision of half a century back is sacramental for many Democrat women. It overrides everything else. As Time magazine's White House correspondent Nina Burley put it during the Monica Lewinsky days, I'd be happy to give Bill Clinton a bleep job just to thank him for keeping abortion legal. I think American women should be lining up with their presidential knee pads to show their gratitude for keeping the theocracy off our backs. Whether Democrat women are as enthused about getting out their presidential knee pads for Joe Biden, the Supreme Court may be enough to get them to the polls and prevent an electoral catastrophe. Even if it doesn't, it's already got the mob seething outside the courthouse. In that sense, it's all designed to pressure the 5 judges who are apparently on board with overturning Roe versus Wade and lean on one of them to change his or her mind. That's to say, it's no different from judge or jury nobbling in organised crime trials. But it's disturbing to see it applied to the highest court in the land. The leak of a full decision has never happened before in the Supreme Court's history. Was it a politically active law clerk? Unlikely that a clerk would do that independently, because he or she, if caught, would never work in the legal profession again, even in America. So it's more likely that it was done on the initiative of one of the judges, and lots of folks are speculating it may well be Sonia Sotomayor, who is by far the most political of these supposed genius jurists. The unimpressive Chief Justice John Roberts has called for an FBI investigation. Yeah, right, that's the most lavishly funded corrupt police agency on the planet, from the Russia investigation to the Trump investigation to some fake-o plot they cooked up to kidnap a Democrat governor and blame it on right-wing militia. These straight-shooting G-men at the FBI couldn't shoot straight at the world's biggest barn door. Like I said, everything in Washington, from coppers to courts, has now been hollowed out by decay and decadence. So that's why this leak happened. The Democrats need something, and their box of tricks is empty. But this is a further degeneration in functioning political norms. And once you have Supreme Court decisions being leaked in full, there's not a lot left. As to the jurisprudence itself, well, this is about a woman's right to choose. And given that the newest judge on this court feels unqualified to say what a woman is on the grounds that she's not a biologist, she has the touch. She has a touch of the Keir Starmer about this. She flees in terror at the mere mention of a BPnist woman. I don't see how you can decide what a woman's right to choose is if you can no longer decide what a woman is. So even that old phrase, which always worked so well for Democrats, feels a little cobweb now. But this decision, if permitted by the mob to stand, doesn't ban abortion. It simply says all 50 states get to decide their own abortion laws, in the same way that the United Kingdom's 3 separate legal regimes decide their own abortion laws. Number 1 for the Anglo-Welsh, number 2 for Northern Ireland, and number 3 for Scotland. I appreciate the UK Conservatives have zero interest in so-called social conservatism, or indeed fiscal conservatism, or any other kind of conservatism these days. I once had lunch with Boris Johnson, who'd been booked on the BBC's Question Time that evening, and he asked me if I had any suggestions as to what he should say. And I told him to put in a word for social conservatism just to wind everybody up. And Boris shuddered and said, "You mean abortion? Good God, no." But even by British standards, America is the abortion mill of the Western world. It's aborted some 62 million babies, including disproportionate numbers of poor black babies since Roe versus Wade was decided. That's the equivalent of wiping out the entire population of the United Kingdom. If you don't have any moral objections to that, well, there are utilitarian ones. When you slaughter fetuses on that scale, you wreck your fertility rate and become more dependent on mass immigration. So in the fullness of time, it's not a choice between babies and no babies. It's between your babies and Somali babies. They're the babies you didn't have. That's the Western world. The present war on the continent, on the other hand, is being waged by 2 Eastern European nations with among the highest abortion rates on the planet. In Russia, approximately 1 in 2 babies is aborted, which is why Putin has insufficient soldiers on hand to stomp all over Ukraine. Only in America, however, has abortion become a talisman, a touchstone of left-wing virtue, so that even as I speak, tons of Hollywood actresses from Sharon Stone to Ashley Judd to Jennifer Lawrence will be taking to Twitter to insist that this is the end of the world as we know it. And whoever's waggling the dead husk of a moth-eaten sock puppet that is Joe Biden is hoping that even a sock puppet can attract presidential knee pads on a Tuesday in November. Let me know what you think. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Tweet me at GBnews. Naomi Wolf is a best-selling author. And we're always pleased to see her. She's banned from Twitter because of her views on the COVID and related matters. But as we touched on here a few months ago, I'm anti-abortion and she's pro-abortion, and we don't do the Twitter banning here. So Naomi, first of all, what do you make of the politics of this leak?
Well, I think you're exactly right that this benefits the Democrats who are out of ideas. And by the way, I'm not pro-abortion. I don't think any thoughtful woman or man is pro-abortion. I support a woman's right to terminate a pregnancy, which is never a happy thing. It's always a tragedy. But to go back to the politics of this, two things. You're right that it's the last thing that will turn out those independent suburban women voters for Democrats at a time when Democrats, and I'm a former Democrat, I voted for this administration to my horror, are ruining, everything when it comes to inflation, border security, the economy, and basic constitutional rights. The other thing that I think is worth noting, and you touched on it, is that these decisions this security has never been breached before. So to me, the fact that someone leaked a draft opinion, I'm just reminding people, it is a draft opinion. It's not yet an opinion that's been handed down. I read it as yet another kind of demonstration that someone who is not our friend, that the institutions of the United States have no more security, that they have no more honor, no more respect, and that anything can be done to them. And you see this with a president who's clearly cognitively impaired being allowed to continue in office. You see it with the kind of annihilation of all of our symbols, one after another. And so now the Supreme Court, which was the last sacred symbol of our tripartite system, has been shown to be without basic security. I don't know before an investigation who did that, but it is part of it, an ongoing demonstration of our, America's symbols are being mocked. Whoever's behind that, we don't know. But I now want to turn to what I think about this decision, if I may, because it's not as dire for women's issues as one might think. Can I just launch right in?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, so first of all, a lot of people who are thoughtful do recognize that Roe v. Wade was badly decided. And here's what I mean. I wrote an essay about this long ago called Our Bodies, Our Souls, in which I said, yes, I believe in a woman's right to basic reproductive choice, but this is a bad decision, and here's why. It was decided based on viability, and that means that before the fetus could live outside a woman's body, you could terminate it, and once it could live, you couldn't terminate it. Well, that's just a bizarre and outdated mark, and it's not black and white. So technology has changed, sonograms have changed, tiny preemie babies are living, and so that leads us to this surreal situation in the United States in which women, and I wrote about this when in Misconceptions, which was about pregnancy, you have a second trimester fetus, you want it, and it's like, oh, look at that cute baby in that sonogram, let's play Mozart to it. Whereas you have a second trimester fetus and you don't want it, and the feminist movement calls it a clump of cells, right? And you can't have it both ways, right? It's either something that should be cherished or not, but you can't pick and choose. And so that did lead to this kind of amoral stance on the part of the abortion rights movement, which I support, right? But it also led to this division in the United States, which is worse than anything in Europe, because reasonable people don't think you should be able to terminate a moving, sentient fetus in the second trimester that feels pain. Whereas in Europe, you don't have this horrible division because you can't terminate second trimester fetuses without all kinds of, extra kind of hoops to jump over. So I do think it was wrongly decided. And also, it doesn't end the right to abortion, even if this turns out to be the Supreme Court decision. It does something that's needed, I think, which is it turns the decision back to the states. And there, a lot of the reasoning in that decision is pretty good. Some of the justices said women are the majority of voters. If they want their elected officials state by state to protect their rights, they can vote that in now. It turns it back to the people and to Congress. And they also are making the point that, you know, one actually the newest female justice said, you know, what about the new laws that allow you to bring a baby to term and then give it up for adoption with no penalty? So that's a reasonable, even a feminist thing to say. You know, it's not like 40 years ago when being an unwed mother would ruin your life, or you wouldn't be able to have the rest of your life if you brought a child to term. So these are reasonable arguments.
Well, let me just ask you about that, Naomi, because if I remember correctly, I think you advised Bill Clinton, of all people, 30 years ago, 25 years ago, whatever it was, that Democrat administration ought to make adoption easier. Would, instead of people having to go to the other side of the planet to adopt, wouldn't it be easier if they were able to adopt 62 million American babies?
Well, thank you for your great memory. I did make the case that adoption should be made easier, and I reached that decision after going to a retreat in which pro-life and pro-choice activists were brought together. And when they actually talked to each other, which they never get to do, they came up with really good policies. Like, I didn't know that pro-life people, a lot of them are willing to make contraception cheaper and easier to obtain to avoid abortion. And they didn't know that pro-choice advocates like us actually would support laws to make adoption easier. So those are sensible things to do to give women real choice. And if you're not part of the kind of establishment, the pro-choice kind of establishment that feeds on headlines like these, then you will want to give women all kinds of options so that women don't feel, as many do, that they are driven to an abortion because they are absolutely desperate and don't see any way of avoiding it. So I did make that case. I didn't advise President Clinton directly. I advised his campaign. And, you know, also polls show that legislation to make contraception more readily available, to make abortion readily available in the first trimester and not so available after that, and also making adoption easier are very popular with that middle ground, those people that are most of us in the middle of the Venn diagram who don't believe in, you know, being able to abort a baby till birth, but who also don't believe in restricting all of women's rights to make their own decisions about their bodies.
No, that's a very good, and I think it's a very important point, Naomi. Thank you very much. Abortion means something different on the continent of Europe from what it does in the United States, or actually even in Canada too. But you're right about the situation in Scandinavia and the Low Countries. When people think of abortion, they think of a first trimester thing, not these fairly grisly ones that you have at basically a 9-month old baby emerging into the world to be dispatched instantly. You can read Naomi on Substack, and you should. We're going to talk about some of those extreme views, extreme abortions coming next, and your thoughts, plus the cost of living and a lot of weird stuff going on in Shanghai. What's up with that? Stay with us. We're coming right back.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, but to the point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Okay, let's get to your take. We've been running a poll on this, very crude. Are you pro-choice or pro-life? And so far, it's pro-choice 53.6%, pro-life 46.4%. But that's closer than you might think with a lot of these things. Let's get to some of your comments. A Twitter user says, I said this at the beginning of the show, that there were three separate legal regimes in the UK. There was Anglo-Welsh one, then Scotland's, and then Northern Ireland's. And the Twitter user objects and says Northern Ireland did not get to choose its abortion laws. Conservatives at Westminster imposed those laws on Northern Ireland. That's true, because the Belfast Assembly wasn't sitting at that point. I mean, basically, Northern Ireland has a choice. You know, it basically gets its laws imposed on it from London, and it gets its laws imposed on it from Brussels. And after Thursday, if the Shinners do as well as they're reported to be doing, God knows where it'll be getting its laws imposed on from them, probably the back room of a pub in Dundalk or wherever. But I think Northern Ireland is grown up enough to be able to decide its own abortion laws. And oddly enough, at one point, an antipathy to abortion was just about the only thing that loyalists and nationalists had in common. So it's odd that. Liz says it's complicated. Abortion before 12 weeks, I'm okay with. Yeah, the arithmetic on abortion gets, for incrementalists like yourself, Liz, the arithmetic on abortion gets more technical, because we're reducing earlier and earlier and earlier the age at which, to go back to what Naomi Wolf was talking about, a fetus is so-called viable. So that date, I'm okay with it up to, 15 weeks, 12 weeks, that date is shrinking, because that fetus is looking more like a viable baby earlier and earlier. Another Twitter user says, it's not a strict pro-choice versus pro-life. Greater restrictions and ensuring viable life is preserved is essential. The Democrats want to kill children in the third trimester, which is no less than murder of a child. You'd be surprised how many lefties are hot for infanticide. Or maybe you wouldn't be surprised. Another Twitter user says, government intervention into a person's medical decisions is the epitome of evil. Where does it stop? Just lie down, sir or madam, and let me give you your 7th booster shot. You'll soon be feeling okay. Ann McElhinney is the co-author of a best-selling book and a film about America's bloodiest abortionist so far. Kermit Gosnell, book, film. They were going to do an off-Broadway play about it. Just right now, opening this month. But the Craven Wimp Manty Waste Milquetoast Theatre cancelled the booking on security grounds once they found the play wasn't pro-abortion. It's great to see you, Anne. We need a national conversation. We need a national conversation. The minute anyone tries to actually put the other side, as you were going to do with your play in New York, then suddenly, oh no, when we say we want a national conversation, we don't want to hear about anything like that.
Yeah, the one thing that they don't want to talk about is abortion. And the reason we have this play in New York in the first place is because J.J. Abrams and Ilana Grazer have a 6-week abortion comedy playing in one of the oldest off-Broadway playhouses in New York, in the Cherry Lane Theatre. And we thought, I went along, I saw the comedy. I'm all in favor of free speech. But it's very interesting, the one thing they don't mention in the more than an hour-long show, they don't mention abortion. That's the one thing that they don't want to mention. And I think that's exactly what we want to mention in our show. I mean, we basically are saying, if you can laugh about abortion, we can tell the truth. And our show is based on the verbatim transcripts from the Gosnell trial, with individuals who gave evidence, particularly expert witnesses, who describe what an actual abortion is. And I don't know, Mark, you know a lot about the theatre. I would say it may well be the first time ever on a theatre stage in New York there will be somebody describing what an actual abortion is. And that's the tricky bit. That's where the pro-choice crowd want to hide.
No, there is a brutality and there is an ugliness to it under all the polite evasions. But you know what British and European opinion is like. It thinks, it's all a bit icky. I really don't want to hear about it. Let's all agree that it can go on and not talk about it. Now you're an Irish lady of the sort of the post super Catholic De Valera founding generation of the Irish state. So you're not someone who was, I'm trying to put it as mildly as possible. You're not you're not some uptight social conservative. You actually changed your mind. When it came to abortion, as opposed to your compatriots, whereas Ireland, unlike the poor fellas north of the border who got it imposed on them by Westminster, south of the border, you guys actually decided to go all in on abortion.
Not only that, Mark, we're the only country on the planet Earth that has ever voted for abortion so far, and with an overwhelming majority. And I was listening to your earlier interview with Naomi Wolf, and I thought it was interesting where she talked about every abortion as a tragedy. Well, not according to the Irish, by the way. The day that the vote was won by the pro-abortion crowd, they danced. People had champagne. There were celebrations. It was all so funny. And as I said, we're obviously making this play in New York in response to a comedy about abortion. So Naomi Wolf back in the day, it was safe, legal and rare. That's not at all what the pro-abortion people are looking for now. They want it up till 9 months. I mean, this is something that I think is one of those things that just doesn't get any press. As a journalist, this is a story that gets very much neglected, and for a very good reason. Because once you find out about it, you don't like what you find out. Particularly in America, where you can have an abortion up to 9 months for any reason. I say that to people, and people don't believe you. People don't believe you because they've never heard of it. And the only reason they haven't heard that is because journalists choose not to report on this story. And I think it's something quite interesting how neglected this is as a journalistic piece. And that was one of the big instincts I had when this Gosnell case came along, because it wasn't so much what this Kermit Gosnell did, which was brutally, delivered babies alive and cut their necks with scissors over a really long period of time. Horrific, awful, every kind of nightmare. What was really horrific, though, for both the jury and for myself, was hearing about what was legal. Because what they had to do with Kermit Gosnell was they had to have experts come and say what was legal so that the jury could work out what was illegal and what was murder. They had to make that distinction. So they had, and we're going to have it in our play, by the way, they had the legal abortion doctor, in this case it was Karen Fusling, who came, she described what a good abortion was, what a legal abortion was. And I can tell you that the jury were completely shocked by that. She described, pulling out of an arm and a leg, etc., etc.
Yeah. Well, we don't all know, but we should know it. But in America, you can basically pull. When you say the difference between legal and illegal, it's about 1.5 inches. You can pull out everything except the last. The only difference between a living born baby and a so-called fetus is that you pull out everything except the last inch of the half, and then the guy plunges his scissors into the back of the skull, and the 9-month-old fetus is dispatched. And this guy in Philadelphia was collecting the fetuses. He was keeping them in jars all over the building. And doing terrible things to these women. And as you say, the point here was not just what he was doing, but the code of omerta, as the mafiosos say, among the media, that they wouldn't. He was America's biggest serial killer, and he couldn't make the papers in America.
Yeah, I mean, you're a journalist, we're journalists. If it bleeds, it leads. This story should have been, front page of every newspaper for months. It's extraordinary. As you say, he's America's biggest serial killer, according to ABC News, by the way. One of their journalists managed to describe him as that. Because, according to the grand jury, he killed thousands of children over a very long period of time, over 3 decades, where he would deliver them alive. He filled the women up with Cytotec. They would deliver the children alive, and then he would cut their necks with scissors. But, I suppose what we're talking about today with the Supreme Court decision is, and you mentioned the bodies, by the way, in the basement. Basically, he didn't pay the bills to the hazmat company. So the bodies piled up. And I was just looking at the discovery from the trial the other day, the photographs of the babies, the 47 babies that were removed from that clinic. And the really shocking thing about those photographs, and they're really powerful, and I'm trying to find a venue for them because a lot of news outlets probably wouldn't publish them. They're from a medical examiner's office. And what's extraordinary about those photographs is that they were legal, that the photographs depict what abortion is legally. And it's very, very shocking because there is absolutely no denying the humanity of these children. And that's why this story continuously gets suppressed, because there is nothing you can say to justify what is legal in America. And this is something now that is facing the courts. And what has just happened, by the way, with this leak, it's an act of thuggery. It's why conservatives, by the way, loved Trump so much, because the Democrats and the pro-abortion crowd, in this case, they won't stop at anything to get their way. They don't like the rules. They don't like how things are going in the Supreme Court, particularly with this decision. So this act of thuggery against one of the pillars of this country, the Supreme Court, is extraordinary, unprecedented, and very kind of frightening, actually, because they're basically, the pro-abortion people are saying, at any cost, we're going to try and change this decision. And now they're going to try and bully those justices who are voting for this into changing their minds. One hopes that they will stick to their guns and the justices will continue with the decision that they had made in February, back in February.
Oh, no, yeah, that's the equivalent of it's naked intimidation, just as I said at the top of the show, like in any organised crime trial. We know where you live. That's what it is. Amy Coney Barrett, I think she's the youngest person on the court, and she's got children in primary school, and we know the school they go to. That's what this is about. Thank you, Anne. It's always great to see you. We have local elections on Thursday. What is uppermost on the voters' minds? Net zero, the Donbass, the 27th booster shot? Well, it's tough to be interested in all that stuff when you can't afford to fill up your car or pay your heating bill. The cost of living is back with us for the first time in 2 generations. And people are facing a choice between heating and eating. How is that going to play out on Thursday? Jasmine Birtles is the nation's money magpie, and we appreciate her insight. Is either party actually committed, of the 2 main parties, but if you can find a 3rd, 4th, 5th or 7th party, go for it. But is either party actually giving any serious thought to how we got into this mess and how we're getting out of it?
No, I really don't think they are. Last time I was on your programme, Mark, I was talking about lockdown being one of the main drivers of the inflation that we have right now. And obviously, the Conservative Party was very pro-lockdown. I think the Labour Party would have locked us down 3, 4, 5 times as hard if they could possibly have done that. So, yeah, hopeless. Really, all of them, I consider, have been hopeless on this. And certainly it's been their fault, and the fault of the Bank of England and other central banks around the world that have fueled this with quantitative easing, printing money, basically.
Well, you make an interesting point about the politics of it, because what was interesting is throughout the Western world, opposition failed to oppose. As you say, the government said, well, we're locking down, we're going to total our economy. And then the leader of Her Majesty's loyal opposition, whether in London or Ottawa or Canberra or wherever, said, oh, yeah, me too, with bells on. I agree with you, only more so. So why should Labour then get to benefit? Why should Labour get to benefit from this from policies it endorsed?
Well, absolutely. And I do think there are many millions of people in this country and in other countries that are wondering genuinely who to vote for, because they don't want to vote for the sitting party, the Conservatives, who have not behaved like Conservatives. They have behaved more like just certainly Labour, I would say socialism, essentially. They don't want to vote for Labour because, as you say, they feel that they would have done a worse job even. So where is the opposition that says, no, we need to have proper government, we need to look at the numbers, we need to have a long-term plan and not just think, oh, there's a bit of a problem here, we must lock down and we must not listen to any other possible view on this, however scientific, however financially and economically sound that might be.
Is it all just too wrecked now? I had an email this morning from someone who's finally been given an appointment with the NHS, something she's been waiting for 2 years. She's got an appointment for May next year. I mean, this is everything too wrecked for these guys to be able to put it back together again?
Well, I mean, I hate to sound pessimistic, but it does rather feel like that. Certainly, what we've got, I think, here is a situation where, from 2008, when we had, the financial crash, our bank and other central banks responded by printing money, and they continued to print money from 2008 to 2020. They continued to print money. It basically went into the banks. The banks said, thank you very much, we'll have that. They put it into lending, house prices went up. 2020 came, lockdown, and money printing went on to steroids. For 2020 up until the end of last year, absolutely horrendous in this country, and even worse in America, and certainly printing around other countries. And that money went into the public. It was used for furlough, big time, business loans, all sorts of stuff, which meant that the money went into the actual economy here. So that has really pushed prices up. So that means that we've got rising price. I mean, it's one of the reasons, probably the main reason, I think, why we have rising prices. There are other reasons. Obviously, Ukraine hasn't helped, supply chains, etc. But that's a big reason. But yes, I think what we also had with lockdown was too long for quite a lot of people to sit around being paid to do nothing. And that has psychologically, culturally, that has changed things, both in this country and in other Western countries that also had furlough. It's been, a lot of people have just simply stopped working. They've taken early retirement. Some people have gone home to their own country. Some people have thought, well, I don't want to do this job anyway, I'll go and do something else. Many people have said, I don't want to go back to the office. I rather like it at home. It's quite nice working in my pajamas, So we've got, I think, a problem, as I say, culturally, socially, when it comes to actual workers, because we had this huge, far too long hiatus over 2020-21.
Yeah, it is very, when you put it like that, Jasmine, which is a very good way of putting it, it's really weird to have something that a term like inflation, which belongs to the sort of pre-COVID era, one of the things that used to come along every couple of generations. And then when you add in all the weirdness of the last 2 years, it's a real difficult question about aligning it. And as to whether, even with property, I mean, let me ask you, do we overemphasize the property stuff? I mean, we all know that you're not supposed to get a mortgage on a 20-bedroom house if you can only afford to furnish 2 of those 20 bedrooms. But right now, you can be living in the smallest accommodation and you can't actually afford to go downstairs to your kitchen and get tea and toast and basic necessities. Is the property market a completely unreliable indicator of societal health?
Well, yes, I think it is. When you look at the disparity between house prices and actual earnings, it's just gone greater and greater and greater. And again, it's not just in this country. I hear in Australia, you can get a mortgage for 10 times your salary, which is, to me, just insanity, but certainly in this country, thanks to the quantitative easing, this money printing, all this extra money, which has been put very largely into the housing market, it has inflated it. People have had mortgages that in normal times would be insane, but because interest rates are so low, really, essentially, they've been at naught, really. 0.25% is basically naught. It's been relatively cheap to borrow, so you can get more and more. So this has, very much helped to increase the price of property. And then we've had all these various things like Help to Buy, the LISA scheme, lifetime ISAs, all sorts that have been there to help first-time buyers. But paradoxically, those have also helped to increase the price of properties in this country. And now what Boris Johnson's suggesting about the right to buy, I consider that will help it again, just simply help to pump this bubble up. And it is a bubble. But at the moment, I don't yet see it crashing. There are sort of various forces at work working against each other. On the one hand, you've got the fact that our currency is so debased now, so many people don't trust cash savings because you're going to get 0.01% interest as opposed to inflation at 7%. It's just there's no point. So more people are putting money into commodities, gold, cars, property, but at the same time, as you say, we've got this pressure. Our actual living costs are going up, so it's becoming more and more difficult for people to afford to pay a mortgage.
Yeah, we that 10 times your income, Jasmine, for some grotty bedsit in a crime-ridden part of town, but it's been extensively remodeled because the guy put a cat flap in the door. I mean, this thing is there are limits. There are limits even to this. Thank you so much for that, Jasmine. Stump the Steyn looms. We're going to get to whatever's on your mind, and also Gordon Chang will have a look at Shanghai and the lessons for the rest of us. Don't touch that dial. We're coming right back.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
We reported a couple of weeks back on the strange goings-on in Shanghai, a new COVID lockdown in a country that basically claimed it had stopped the COVID in its tracks and driven a stake through its dark heart in April of 2020. Now suddenly millions of people are being locked in their flats or shanghaied into quarantine facilities, and domestic pets are being clubbed to death in the streets. What's really going on? Gordon Chang is a leading China expert. He's the author of The Great US-China Tech War. You know, the most basic lesson, Gordon, from those first couple of months of the COVID was that China had plans for the rest of us, and we didn't really realize it at the time. So what is the truth about what's going on in Shanghai? Why do they want us to let us know that Shanghai's in lockdown?
That's a great question, Mark. I think that this is entirely driven, though, by domestic political concerns. You have, for instance, Xi Jinping, the Chinese ruler. He wants a precedent-breaking third term as General Secretary of the Communist Party. He's known as the author of this zero COVID policy, so he can't allow criticism of it. And at the same time, the Communist Party in the early days of the pandemic, going back to the first months of 2020, made its control of the virus a test of its legitimacy. It said that because China was able to better deal with the disease, that it had a superior form of governance to Western democracy, specifically American democracy. So right now, China is really being hoisted on its own petard because we've sort of gotten past this. But China clearly is in the middle of this, and it's getting worse because it's not just Shanghai, it's not just Beijing, it's all across the eastern part of the country.
Yeah, what's interesting is there's a difference between locking down Wuhan and locking down Shanghai, which is one of those glittering cities of the new China, those spectacular coastal boutiques. How do people in Shanghai feel about it?
They push to the breaking point. You know, the Shanghainese consider themselves to be the highest form of humanity in a sense. I mean, they brag that it's the most sophisticated city in China. It's certainly the largest one. It's the financial capital. But as we have seen over the last 5 weeks, it's been reduced to a primitive society where people are scrounging for food, scrounging for daily necessities, people going hungry. And eventually, you know, we have seen not only people banging pots and pans from their balcony, not only screaming from their balconies, but also surging into the streets, breaking quarantines, really scrounging for food. So this has really been a lesson to the Shanghainese that the society is broken down entirely.
Why do you think Chairman Xi would want to do this? Because I mean, if you believe the official numbers, Chinese deaths just stopped cold one day in April 2 years ago, and nobody has died. And he complains that this whole coronavirus thing is something that the rest of the world is stuck with, and in fact he blames them for introducing it to China. So why is it necessary for him to do this super lockdown?
Well, once he's boxed himself into political positions, then he really doesn't have a choice, because this becomes every case of coronavirus, every death actually becomes a critical threat to Communist Party legitimacy. So they did this to themselves. And, just in general, Mark, everything China does, it considers that it is in a struggle with America and with the West. So everything, you talk about economic growth. Well, economic growth rates now are considered to be extremely political in China because Xi Jinping has said that China has to grow faster than the United States this year. And so officials know that they have no choice but to make sure that that's reported that way. Well, it's true with coronavirus as well. It is just a competition between China and the rest of the world.
Is the Politburo surprised that it basically got away with the COVID? There was a brief moment in the spring of 2020 when Donald Trump was talking about decoupling from China. Then they managed to get rid of Trump, and no one talks about decoupling anymore.
I think that they are extremely surprised by coronavirus coming back. And, it's not just China. Hong Kong, for instance, after the initial wave, had long months of just basically virus-free living. Same thing with Taiwan, which is lauded to be the world's best response to coronavirus. It came back to Taiwan as well. The difference is that China has gone to these insane extremes in order to control the disease, and they are crippling their own country because China is now, its economy is in contraction. It's also occurring at the time of a debt crisis. So this is like the worst possible time for China's economy to go into the red numbers. And this really just shows that I think that the whole Communist Party leadership was really arrogant about this, and they've been taken by great surprise. So that's an important question you asked, Mark.
Does it actually jeopardize Chairman Xi and his grip on power? Yep. Okay.
I think it does.
We'll take that. And no, that's very interesting, and we'll bring you back to talk about that, Gordon, because that's a very interesting point. It wasn't anything to do with Trump. It wasn't anything to do with the West. It wasn't anything to do with Putin. He's got problems he made for himself. That's very interesting. Let's go stumping before they turn us out of here. Elizabeth says we need to ditch the first past the post voting system in order to get different people and parties into Wastemonster. Do you agree, Mark? Well, I'm a big fan of the first past the post system compared to all the others, and we do have new parties, and it's better to have party flexibility. But be honest, when you look at Macron in France, you just wind up with this. They've got parties come and go all the time now, and all that means is that the World Economic Forum has to, and Klaus Schwab have to hire guys in every party. Alan says, is it really a headline gaffe for the PM to not know or care who Lorraine Kelly is? Do you know, when I think of Lorraine Kelly, I think of her in the full flower of her loveliness when I first watch her on TV, and I can't imagine Boris wasn't watching her either. But it doesn't matter. Boris barely knows who anybody is. Terry says the Kermit Gosnell story that Ann McElhinney was talking about is jaw-dropping. Who knew of it before tonight? Putin is a saint by comparison. Well, Putin actually recognizes that abortion is a threat to Russian demographics, and he's trying to stop it. But the Kermit Gosnell story is disgusting all by itself. I mean, basically, he collected babies and he kept their bodies in the dead babies in the basement. Absolutely disgusting. That is it. Dan Wootton is going to titillate your Tuesday for 2 hilarious hours. Stay safe, stay free.
Hi there, I'm Aidan McGibbon. Warmer, drier and brighter weather is on the way, but for the next 24 hours at least it stays generally cloudy. There'll be outbreaks of rain overnight, followed by heavy showers on Wednesday. This area of high pressure is going to move in for the weekend, but over the next few days weather fronts will topple around the top of it, and they'll bring some outbreaks of rain or showers during much of Wednesday and Friday in particular. And for Tuesday nights, it stays cloudy, spells of rain crossing Northern Ireland, Scotland, northern and central England, as well as North Wales, eventually making their way further south into East Anglia and the southeast. Staying drier for the South Wales and southwest area, but for most, because of the cloud, It's going to be a mild start to Wednesday, 9 to 11 Celsius generally. But it's a grey and damp start to the day, a lot of cloud cover, that cloud covering some hills, some mistiness around coasts as well. And I think it'll take some time to brighten up. In fact, many areas will stay cloudy throughout the day. But where we do see signs of brightness, there'll also be heavy showers developing. Initially towards the west, but increasingly the focus later, with highs of 17 or 18 degrees, will be across central and eastern parts of England, as well as eastern Scotland. A warmer day to come for many, but that warmth leading to some lively downpours, hail and thunder possible in places. They do die away on Wednesday night, and during the early hours of Thursday, for many places it's dry with lengthy clear spells. The exception, northern and western parts of Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, where it will be cloudier with some outbreaks of rain. But it's a mild start to Thursday once again, with 9 or 10 degrees, a typical temperature at the start of the day, and soon warming up actually. For much of England and Wales, it's dry with long spells of sunshine, perhaps the odd shower towards the west.